Hey Fitheads, today we talk with Patrick Samy, the CEO and co-founder of Span. So I'm covered in devices and I'm constantly trying to figure out what they're saying to me and how they tie into each other. And it's just a guess. And what Patrick is doing with his company is making it less of a guess. And you can hook up all of your different devices and data and see it all together and over the long term, which is really cool.
Yeah. And he gives us prescription or
Actual
actual
recommendations.
recommendations of things to do. He gives us
Right.
tests to do, or he gives his wonderful clientele who's covered in devices. And then the device says something like, oh, you know what? Your sleep sucked last night. And then everyone's like, well, okay, what do I do? And then boom.
You talk to Span. They're giving you actionable items to work on improving your health versus just showing you the data, which is
Right.
really cool. So not only is it connecting all of these different things, it's also giving you something to do to make it better.
Yeah, which is exactly the whole
Yeah.
in
The
the
whole that
market
we've
that I
complained about a lot
a
on this
lot.
podcast.
Welcome to Total Fitheads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Welcome, Patrick. So glad to have you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about living forever.
That's the goal.
Is it?
Yeah, I don't know. That's definitely one of the things that I've been interested in more recently is it's not like how do you increase the amount of years you can have on the planet, but it's definitely how do you live for the same amount of time and potentially run a marathon when you're 80 or even 100. I think we all enjoy sports and fitness. And I think one of the things that I've seen in my family when you get to 80 is that you're not able to play the game that you love playing when you were 20 years younger. And so one of my goals is to be able to achieve that when I'm 80, but also maybe move that to 100, maybe still play tennis when I'm there.
Why not 200?
Why not? I mean, that's out of the, I guess step one is how do we make sure that we're all doing the right things in the things that we can control? So there's environment, but specifically our lifestyle, diet, sleep, and exercise. How do we make sure that we're doing the right things for us specifically? And I think a lot of the devices and consumer labs that emerged in the last 10 years kind of brought us more data to achieve that, like levels and 23andMe and Eat Sleep and Aura. And I think they're bringing the kind of data that allows us to make better decisions that are extremely personal, rather than going online, going on Google, and basically typing exercise plan or diet plan and picking something and going after that.
Yeah, the world of personalization is here, and I'm finally realizing I shouldn't just listen to that bodybuilder on Instagram because he's probably different than me.
Exactly.
Okay, but yeah, this idea of increasing your health span, is there, okay, we had just been talking about in the last podcast death date and when you're expected to die. Is there like an average time before your death date where things start to decline? When is it that, yeah, you're no longer playing tennis, or is it different for everyone? Or does science say that, yeah, the last 20 are going to suck?
Yeah, the last 15, 20 are going to be definitely less. I guess you're not going to be able to maintain the same performance, and your level of injuries will go up dramatically from that point. And it's all statistics on the entire population. So as you just mentioned, there's a high degree of personalization here. There's a lot of people who are already getting to that goal to be close to 100, and they're still able to run every day. They have to keep in mind a lot of things, but they're able to prevent injuries, and they have all the structure they need to get there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so give us an overview of Span. The fitheads aren't familiar with what you do, so can we get an idea of that?
Yeah, so it's kind of the problem that a lot of us have we've got an O-ring, we've got a whoop strap, an edge sleep, a level CGM, all these things. I've got a CGM too. So, we've got all these devices. When you start looking at the daily variations in the data, it tells you directionally what I'm doing is working or it's not working, and I need to avoid that glass of whiskey at night and all these things that mess up your HRV the next day as much as possible, or mitigate those things, avoid doing them most of the time, and I guess make them the 20% of the time things that are not going to mess up your numbers in the long run and not allow you to improve your health in the long term. So I guess one of the things we're trying to do with SPAN is essentially give you the recommendations that close the loop between the data and the actions you need to be making. But if you Google that kind of information, it will be very difficult to understand my HRV is going up. And this study is saying that most people who did X were able to increase their HRV continuously. And that's my number one problem. Should I be even testing that intervention? Am I in the right context compared to what that intervention in the study tested? And if that's the case, then maybe I should go on it. But if that's not the case, maybe I should find another one. And so what we've been doing is my co-founder, Dr. Adam Botane, who's a specialist in longevity and performance, he's looked at all this evidence and collected a database that basically allows us to say, when you're coming to us and you say, I want to improve my sleep, we look at all your data from your aura, for example, and we look at exactly what are the area for you that we can improve in your sleep. So for someone, it could be improving their deep sleep and REM sleep. So for someone, it's more consistency in the duration. For someone, we see a weirdly variable respiratory rate at night, and they might have some mild sleep apnea. Some people, they have an elevated resting heart rate before they fall asleep and after. And so that in case maybe they're exercising too late or eating too late. And so all these things will have our different issues or different areas to improve. And therefore, they have different interventions and things you can change to improve. The same thing is not going to fix all these issues. And so the first step we do is actually going through that base of evidence and basically making recommendations. But instead of sending you the scientific paper, what we do is we basically create content. We've broken them down into 1 week changes that we call experiments. And so you can run those experiments against the data you have. So you bring on the app all the data you have from the Oura Ring and the levels, for example. We show you all the metrics. And instead of looking at the day-to-day changes, because we're not competing with those companies, we're actually looking at the weekly changes. We average, for example, your blood sugar levels or your deep sleep for last week. We average it for this week, and we compare those two things and the relative progress. So it's almost as if you're running a training program or a sprint for 1 week on your health, and you're looking at that one experiment you're doing and the different steps that will get you there, and also allowing you to validate whether that experiment is working. And so people on SPAN run different changes on their diet, sleep, and exercise, things like trying mouth taping, cold showers, everything that everyone is testing these days on the internet, basically. And we provide them with the science behind it. And it allows you to say, Matteo seems to be saying that for sleep, and then Dave Asprey is talking about this, and then Tim Ferriss, and then Peter Attia, and then all these things. Okay, let's sit down and make a map and figure out which ones are the highest levers for you, and then we'll actually test those things first.
Have you done it?
Yeah, no, I've been myself on the program. I think that's one of the reasons why we started the company, is that before all of that, I was myself trying to optimize my health. So I was born and raised in France, where I played tennis since I was 7 years old. Played my whole life competitively in high school, in university, but I was never going to be a pro. I was playing for fun. And I started working as an engineer at Microsoft, where I was building consumer products for Skype. And so as you can imagine, I was super active in university and then started sitting down for 10 hours during the day for those 3 years. So I ended up being 30 and slowly seeing my health move in the wrong direction. I was waking up with a brain fog. I had energy levels that weren't as stable during the day. I could see that my body fat percentage was going up. From the outside, I still looked relatively physically fit. I was not sitting on the couch after work. I was playing tennis twice a week, going to the gym on top, and doing a few things to maintain good health. but that wasn't enough, and that wasn't personalized enough. And I thought at 30, I did a blood test, and I realized that basically my triglyceride levels, my blood sugar levels, and all these numbers were essentially moving in the wrong direction. And that was kind of the trigger. I got the wiring, started playing with my sleep for 3 months. I got an Apple Watch and a CGM. I kept experimenting, and I was faced with that problem, I guess. But before starting a company, I just went to my friend Adam, who's my co-founder now. And I was trying to save him some time. I knew I had gone to a sports MD, and he wanted to charge me 50K a month to give me like a full concierge service, which, you've probably heard of Peter Chia. He charges in the same range. All these guys charge a ton of money to have like the best experience you can have. And they personalize to that extent, maybe 10 times better. And so the question was, how can I just save Adam's time by letting him tell me what kind of metric he's looking at, and I self-drive that process? Because I love data, I love doing that, I love keeping track of how my health is evolving, and also caring about my fitness and all these things that I'm doing, and making sure that I'm always adjusting to optimize. And so I was doing that, and I was struggling, I guess, to understand how to really identify the changes that are going to make my HRV go up and reduce my resting heart rate and allow me to perform better at peak heart rates for longer, and all these things that Adam solved in an instant. And so to give you an example, so we worked for 6 months together. We picked up 8 habits with that process that we validated. We had no app, just a spreadsheet, looking at my data on a weekly basis and checking in. And the first 10 minutes, he saw my blood sugar levels. He saw in the middle of the night that I had random spikes. And he said, that's not something I'm expecting. Like, not everyone has that, but I can, my intuition tells me that you're in a group of people who has a slower metabolism, and it's not linked to your nutrition or exercise. It's just genetic. Let's test this one thing and we'll see how it goes. And so he said, eat at 6 p.m., go to bed at the same time, around 11. And we'll do that for 2 weeks, and we'll see how the data changes, how your CGM data is changing. And I think it took 5 or 7 days for my blood sugar levels at night to be completely flat, or slightly going down slightly, going back up again in the morning, as you would expect. And I probably had some mild insulin resistance at the time, but that wasn't the only reason. I think it was just that for me, eating and exercising after 7:30 or 8 p.m. and going to bed at that time is not enough time to go back to baseline insulin levels, glucose levels, and have the optimal sleep quality and see my HRV go back up again and recover optimally, basically. And so, knowing that, we basically then said, okay, these are the 5 things we need to test. We can go for a walk for 20 minutes after dinner. We can also avoid the carbs for dinner and move that to lunch if you do have carbs. And all these things that basically end up having the same consequence, which is I go to bed with fasting levels and I consistently have the same outcome in sleep quality and recovery the next day, and all these things that help me basically avoid waking up one day and thinking, what happened the previous day? I feel like I haven't recovered. This entire night of sleep was for nothing, basically.
So you could feel a food hangover, for lack of a better word. Could you feel a big difference in your like day-to-day from doing that?
Yeah, definitely. The brain fog after 6 months went away completely in the morning. I had much better mental clarity overall. My energy levels were much more stable during the day. I didn't have that crash that I used to have after lunch around 2, 3 p.m. And weirdly, I had been focusing on my performance at tennis for a very long time without looking at any biological marker. And for the first time, I was able to actually play a game for 15 to 25 minutes more at peak heart rate. And I could see that before. I could see, my Apple Watch get to 180, 190. I started making a lot of mistakes. I breathe fast. All that happens. And that time was just pushed back by 15, 20 minutes.
I start smashing rackets.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, like the Hulk.
Wow, that's so cool. And you felt a change with it. That it's interesting to me because it feels like the impetus was not not so huge, right? You kind of felt like something was off and you didn't know truly until you took those labs, right? Do you find that it's common that there are hidden problems that people don't even know about? I'm asking because I know my glucose was all over the place and I didn't realize it till I saw it. Or I had high cholesterol labs too.
Yeah, I feel like I mean, at the time, I didn't know anything about nutrition and any of these things. But over the course of the last 2 years, building this and learning from Adam, from my co-founder Rachel, who's a nutritionist, I think we all realized how much personalization we need to be able to get to optimal health. And so following public health recommendations is just not enough. And then as a result of having those recommendations are pretty fixed and structured for the entire population, a lot of studies are showing that between 60 and I think the largest one was 88% of the population may have metabolic dysfunction. So that's basically the norm to be unhealthy from a metabolic point of view.
Which
then
population?
When it comes to
the French population
or
the US population? Let's get that up. I feel like that's up. That's up at 85, 90.
Over 100% somehow.
Yeah, it's 115%, it feels like.
Dogs have metabolic dysfunction.
Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. And I think there's still a lot of things we have to discover because unfortunately, I guess the healthcare system is what it is. It's really focused on being reactive and extremely good at that. If you're, towards the end of your life in the last 20 years, we've got a lot of stuff to help you. But before that, at 29, the only option was that they seemed to be sensible. And looking at the data was that Sports MD that charged $50K a month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you see that changing? I feel like I'm maybe in an echo chamber because we have people on like you that are constantly talking about not just reactive health. And do you expect that to be well, at least an American change, that we're focusing more on longevity and not just reacting to disease? Or is that going to be a long-term problem?
I think it's going to change, and it's not going to take more than 10 or 15 years because otherwise we won't be able to afford paying for healthcare. And so it will change at that rate, probably because otherwise the system is just going to crumble and it's not going to work anymore. I guess where things are today, I've been really surprised when we started Span. Before actually building a product and trying to see if people were interested, to realize that I thought the biohacker type person and the quantified self and the people who already had a spreadsheet would be interested in something like Span. And actually, we're getting a lot of people who are not like that at all. They're the average person who works in a bank and just wants to stay healthy. They have a new ring. They just want to be able to get more recommendations to be able to improve their health. The executive athlete, the person who similarly, runs a marathon on weekends and they have a day job, maybe in tech, maybe in another industry. And so I was really surprised to see that a lot more people than what we think have one of these. I think, it shows now in numbers. I think Aura raised a massive round as a result of doubling their sales, Whoop as well. I think a lot more people that are not in that niche category anymore are becoming interested in data and the act of proactively looking at your health and improving.
Yeah.
And I think pro sports, a lot of famous athletes are now talking about recovery or biohacking and reading stuff like that. And I think that that's sort of a good indicator, or not an indicator, but like a introduction to a lot of normal.
It's cool now to
it's
biohack.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hopefully cool
that's
for women
really interesting.
too. I'm trying to get girls in on it. It feels like a boys' game still. So hopefully we have some lady total fit head listeners.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. That we keep thinking about this in the team. I think our ratio is super low. It's 15% of customers are women. And there's just not a lot of female athletes in general. It's not been a thing historically, and it hasn't changed as fast as other, areas where there's more equality today. And yeah, so I think in female athletes, and specifically sports where you get a lot of public attention, there's been a lot of personalities and famous players in tennis and gymnastics and other sports. And I think it's probably starting to change. And I would love to see more of these women, I guess, getting into this this mindset of looking at their health as well. And I feel like more and more people are doing this. When you look at the Olympians who are wearing and wearing and talking about it, and you can see that happening already. So yeah, I think if I give it 5 years, there's been a lot more equality there. But we're also trying to do a bit more. We're getting a lot of women who have things like PCOS, and they are a competitive rower at the same time. And there's so many challenges with that. And so I think it's really interesting to be able to work on these problems too. My hope is that within the next few years, we'll be able to start research partnerships with universities and be able to actually do proper studies on these things and say, if you use an Oura ring and you have PCOS, or you're a female athlete and we're looking at this specific area of your physiology that's slightly different, this is what we can achieve by having like a 100% personalized program, basically looking at all these markets.
Yeah, very cool. A bunch of things that I want to unpack there. One, that we're talking about these athletes now, but we opened with longevity, and I'm slowly learning that those are kind of opposed, or longevity, athletic performance, and then aesthetics. They're not the same goal. So can you speak a little bit about that? Maybe I'm wrong. And how do you deal with those different goals with your users?
Yeah, so I think you're completely right. All of the members who join SPAN today are interested in increasing their healthy lifespan, and that's the part of longevity they're interested in. So sometimes what's interesting is, in a third of cases, they are athletes, more often endurance athletes, and I guess they are the stage of their competitive journey where they're looking to do something else. And they know that in the long term, they're not going to be able to maintain that level of performance without having a negative impact on their long-term health. And so they're looking to retire from that point of view and find what's the sweet spot between, I can still enjoy the game, the sports that I'm playing, but also I can maintain that health for the long run. And so, yeah, that's where athletes, I guess, fits in SPAN today. But all the other members are looking more at improving things like heart rate variability, lowering their resting heart rate in normal range, being able to see their blood glucose levels, I guess, have less variability over time and be more stable throughout the day, but also be in range for some people who seem to be out of range really often when they wake up in the morning. Also with sleep, I guess one of the areas is how you get more consistency in a lot of different markers that we can measure. A lot of things that the metrics that we get are not necessarily the stuff that you see on the Oura app, because again, we don't want to compete with them, but we find things that are more relevant from a clinical point of view where the coaches are actually going to be able to help you with that data. So we compute things like wake after sleep onset. We take some of the interruptions after the first time you fall asleep every night, and that number of minutes is actually really interesting to follow, to see how you sleep and how you feel the next day. That's a great reflection of how you feel the next day. And so looking at these markers, we can improve various aspects of your consistency in your sleep in the long term. And so our hope, and right now Adam is working on that, the MD, is building a score that kind of reflects your diet, sleep, and exercise, or metabolic health, sleep, and exercise / fitness level. And that will basically be some sort of longevity score that's directionally valid and that you can modify by doing any sort of change. So we can actually track how you're doing in long term. And the second part, which is the interesting one, is right now you can bring your own blood test. So if you've done we can also integrate with 23andMe, but if you've done a blood test, we can bring that data on board. We are working on the ability to prescribe our own blood tests. So things that are a bit more reactive. So if you're tired consistently and you seem to not be able to fix that with any sort of intervention, we might look at testing your vitamin D, and that might be the one thing that we neglected and that we can fix really easily. We just need to know that that's the problem. But we also want to be able to get the basic panels that maybe we'll repeat every 6 months or 12 months that will allow us to do tests like the pheno age test. So we basically put a lot of different markers and we get a score in the end that's been tested clinically and we know is valid for reflecting overall your lifestyle health and how that's impacting your longevity. And so we basically will combine all these different markers into a score that can change over time, where we know that based on the experiments that we've tested, we're able to modify certain aspects of this score on sleep, on the blood test, and all these different data points that we can measure. So that's really the goal and how we want to expand from just the wearables data to a few more clinical markers.
I know that you like all of them and that you're trying to get a big but if you had to rank which data is most useful to you, or does it all make a web? Like are you like, oh, thank God that the 8 sleep exists, or you're like 8 sleep information? Who cares?
What's the most problematic tech?
Yeah. Or do you find, or let me, in a different way, do you find that like different things give you different results for the same, or different devices give you different results for the same things that they're trying to track?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess you probably have the Whoop and the Oura Ring. And if you look at heart rate variability or a combination of the different scores that they give you that should be going in the same direction, that doesn't always happen. We've got a ton of people who've got both right now. So we're looking at how to sort through that data and decide which one to take into account. How do you use both to actually eliminate some of the things that could be noise? So the wristband often compared to the ring could have a lot of different environmental factors that will explain why the data is different. So, typically everyone says the Apple Watch is the best device in terms of accuracy, but that's only if you wear it on the tightest setting. Otherwise, it's really noisy. And yeah, it's really interesting because actually it's not practical to wear it on the tightest setting. I hate doing that. And that's how you get the best data, apparently.
I do tighten it before a workout, but like throughout the day or if I'm walking, no. But also, do I really need the tightest of data whenever I'm on a walk? Probably not. But okay, yeah, I mean, at this point, I guess we're just sort of expressing our frustration with the lack of accuracy currently, but I do think, whatever, technology is exponential, and the next year we'll be so good at knowing exactly what the data is that
the chip that we put in our chest heart.
Yeah.
The chip that we insert into our heart will probably tell us a lot more.
Yeah.
I think they're all directionally valid, and that's the reason why, compared to 10 years ago, we can actually make decisions on a daily basis. It's not often that you'll see a significant change in your HRV. That's not actually happening. The absolute value of that change, or the absolute value in total, the actual measurement of the milliseconds in HRV, that might be wrong or slightly different from the actual value, but that's always how the sensors and algorithm work. But is that not enough information to tell you, oh, what happened yesterday or whatever positive change you tried to make had a positive impact? And so over time, you're kind of reinforcing the idea that this data has provided good results. And so that's kind of the thing that we're trying to improve on SPAN today. It's literally, you run that experiment, you've been doing heart rate zone 2 training. You open that and you see every single metric for that period of time since you started it compared to your baseline the 2 weeks before, for example. And we can tell you you've got a plus 5% on your HRV, minus 2% on your deep sleep, and all these things that happen, which give us a lot of data to actually expand the experiment or decide when we can conclude that something is providing benefits or not, but also for anyone really to be able to follow whether they're on track with their habit schedule and whether those things in their routine is actually able to help them perform.
That makes me feel a little better. I have read that even directionally, these things are not useful. So like if I do increase my deep sleep, day to day, that still might be garbage somehow, but you have seen that at least, what is it, accuracy versus precision, at least it's directionally correct.
Yeah, I think that's the case in most devices today for sleep and heart rate variability, heart rate. For heart rate, it becomes harder, apart from Whoop, I think it becomes harder for the device to be accurate when you're above 150 BPMs. That's where the devices that are really focused on having the best accuracy become really useful, because Whoop can actually go up to, I think, 190 and have the same accuracy as a chest strap. But I guess, unless you're saying like you're seeing micro variations of a couple of milliseconds compared to when you do something significant and you see a big change, those ones, I guess, yeah, we shouldn't obsess about the small changes and the small variations, because we're not entirely sure that it actually reflects something that was positive or negative the previous day or the previous hours.
Okay. And you talk about this database of all these tests you have. How big is that? Do you just have tons of things for people to try based on how unique we all are, or is this like a pretty short list of what humans can do to improve being a human?
It's an okay list, but it's definitely getting longer. We've got a lot of papers to look at and to integrate into the platform. So we've got about a bit more than 50 right now, 50 different experiments that you can run on sleep or diet or exercise. All of these are completely different, I guess, avenues or verticals that you can focus on to improve one of these areas. And we have a lot of those experiments to improve, but we're also building different levels. So you can actually try level 1 of cold showers, which is turning the tap down for a few seconds, and then just training to do that. Also, same thing with the breathing technique that goes with it, and all these different things that could help you improve various areas too. And we've got this idea of basically a master protocol that all the coaches look at that includes a lot of the different markers we're able to track and allow them to identify where are the biggest levers for a specific individual. So looking at their data, should we focus on those 3 things? Is HRV and wake after sleep onset and glucose variability maybe the focus? And in that case, they'll prioritize all the interventions that match that. So for every marker, we've got a list of scientific papers and the experiments that goes with them.
It's interesting because so many of these things, they give you the problem. And you're like, okay, cool, thanks. All right. And a lot of times I know that like we didn't even know that these problems existed 5-10 years ago. We're talking about HRV now very specifically, but like I don't remember any basketball players in the 80s talking about HRV. You know what I mean? So it's like a totally interesting new for years we had new problems, and now it's nice to have new prescriptions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That being said, I spoke to someone called Don Moxley, who was a sports scientist in university. I can't remember which one, but he had been doing this for 15 years at least. So in the mid-2000s, he had started working with entire teams of football players where he was monitoring HRV continuously. And the goal was to see, at the scale of an entire team, how do you monitor the amount of training they do throughout the week and how that's allowing to be at optimal performance on the day of a game. So yeah, super interesting guy. And I realized that these things are not necessarily new, but like they were certainly not available at the scale where they are now with an Ring or Strap.
Right. And then where do you see this going? What's the next thing that I didn't know that I should care about and is probably redlining?
Everyone is asking me that question, and I am like, okay, I need to get a better answer for that. But there's so many markers because I guess on one side, it feels like one of the things we're not taking into account when we're thinking about absolute data on sleep and diet and exercise or metabolic health is like the stress level. And specifically when you're trying to change things, if something becomes too much effort, it's often going to reflect the data in a negative way. So it's the experiment or the change is not going to work. And you'll have almost no way to tell that. Your HRV will probably change a little bit to reflect that mental or physical, that mental stress in that case. But measuring cortisol levels, measuring, other things like that could help us understand how those hormones fluctuate throughout the day. There's a ton of things that change. And I feel like this is where we can unlock a lot of value for telling you exactly where you should wake up and go to sleep to optimize exactly how you feel in the morning to be 100% every day. So I'd say that, yeah, I'm waiting for the next generation of sensors that are not just continuous glucose monitors, but that do things like cortisol levels, C-peptide, insulin, to get a better picture of, is it just my glucose and am I like this weird person that genetically responds weirdly, or is it actually that I'm overproducing insulin and I'm putting myself at risk of having insulin resistance 20 years down the line? So I guess all these different things are, right now we're just assuming from the glucose data, oh, this is what we think is behind, and we're doing studies to kind of predict that, but actually it would be just better to have the data.
So how come, how come you don't make the sensor?
I looked at it.
Or is that a secret? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that was my previous company. It's so incredibly difficult. And I have so much respect for Matteo, for Harpreet, and the original team behind the product, and all the teams working on this, because it's incredibly difficult to build a company around a hardware product. And as soon as you say hardware product that goes into the body and measures something, it becomes 10 times harder, maybe 100 times harder. So yeah, I would just say that I really respect them. I have no idea how you actually build that, go about and build that kind of company. It's really impressive. Unless you're like Abbott maybe, and you're like already, pharmaceutical giant, and you've got the means to take the time and do the R&D for years with a bunch of super smart people that you can hire to do that.
Yeah, it seems like a really hard problem, but I'm also convinced that very soon my lab will actually be a graph throughout the day, and I will see my cortisol the same way that I look at my glucose now, and it will be on my Apple Watch and not even go into my body. Somebody out there is already making that happen. I just need to sit and wait for it.
Yes, Super Sapiens this week announced their band that basically connects to the CGM and shows you your real-time glucose data. And that's just another wearable. But seeing that data in real time and seeing the pictures and the video of the products, I was really, I thought that that's definitely the kind of product that will change how I'm able to leverage the data in my daily, in the daily things that I do to optimize my diet specifically. And having the data just there, or even if it's an Apple Watch and the screen's not turned on, I just open that thing and I can see where my glucose is at. I think that would be super interesting. I hope everyone else is on that too, Levels and NutriSense and all the other brands.
Yeah, seeing it in real time is obviously super helpful, but you have this other element of a coach in your app, right? How can you talk about the importance of that and having someone there to guide you? And is that what you're seeing in the future in terms of scalability, or how important is that?
Yeah, it's super important for us. I think we don't believe that we could do 10% of the job we're doing now without a human, and that's the reason why we have top people. So we've got Rachel, who joined the team very early on. She's one of our co-founders, registered nutritionist who grew up with a form of cancer called Hodgkin's lymphoma, studied nutrition, started focusing on her health, and optimizing to just feel better after treatment. And that's when she stumbled upon data and DORing and all these devices and started focusing on her sleep, her diet, and exercise. And so she's got this like really interesting scientific background, so she can read a scientific paper and actually think about it clearly. And then on the other side, she's got this really interesting patient perspective, having been through that journey, but she's able to coach people into, with the clinical knowledge, making recommendations that are pretty accurate, that people are really happy with. And so I think that's one of the things that we're looking for. So we're hiring our next coach who's joining the team this week. It's also someone who has a scientific background. He has a master's in nutritional science. And so we think that we can actually have a set of coaches that are extremely good for the specific purpose of what people are doing on Span, which is often looking very deeply at their data and trying to understand what it means and to improve that thing that they're trying to improve. And often it's because they've been listening to Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan and David Sinclair and Peter Attia, and they've been trying to do this job themselves. That was like a part-time job for most of these guys who are joining Span today. And they're trying to make sure that they've got someone who's got a bit more experience that can save them the time mostly, and bring the convenience of just making those recommendations. So yeah, the coaching is going to be super important. That being said, I think in 18 months to 2 years, the goal is to use the data set to first make our coaches more efficient, give them statistics on this experiment. So step one is this experiment for everyone seems to perform 10 times better to improve deep sleep. Step two is on individual A, this is the best experiment to improve their deep sleep. On individual B, it's actually another one because we've looked at all the other variables. And by the way, this is probably going to be a black box thing, so we won't be able to tell why, but we'll know that statistically for that individual, this is going to be the best one to go for. And so we don't want to completely circumvent the coach making their own decision, but they'll be able to see that data and to use it in their coaching. And when we're satisfied that we can make predictions for all the areas where we recommend stuff today, and we can get to 95% accuracy. So if we make a recommendation that has 95% chances to actually improve the marker we're trying to improve in the same direction, then we'll definitely close the loop. And I think at this point, we want to create a plan that would be a bit cheaper, that will allow a lot more people who just own an Apple Watch, maybe on Huawei, to get the same level of recommendations, which, obviously having a human in the loop today is a bit more expensive. So that's the reason why we're looking at this in this way.
Right. Yeah. And to explain to the fitheads, I've already started on Span, and you have in fact increased my deep sleep. And it was like a stupid relaxation thing that I do before I go to bed. And I'm like, this isn't going to work. And in the middle of me saying that, I fall asleep. And then I've actually seen the metrics move up. So that's pretty cool.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah,
I'll definitely feed that back to the team.
For sure. And you're talking about all these tests. Can you do multiple at a time? And then too many variables? And also, how long do you test, or is it individualized to what test you're doing is how long that you take a look at that change?
Yeah, so we do one at a time only, and the average duration is 10 days, but you're right in saying that some experiments will basically show results within 3 to 5 days, and some will take 2 to 3 weeks. So if we're trying to test heart rate zone 2 training, it's going to take a lot of time to kind of see baseline metrics changing, your resting heart rate, how your VO2 max at peak performance, and all these things. So, it's probably going to take 3 weeks to 4 weeks before we see any change. With mouth taping, we've got a number of people, we've seen the data, it's like respiratory rate is just weird. And then they do that, and the next day they're messaging their coach and they're saying, this one thing changed my life. And I've actually, had the best night of sleep I've ever had. And so I guess, yeah, it really depends on these experiments. And sometimes it's like really a quick fix. Sometimes it's, most of the time actually, it's more like a long-term change that you have to make.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Should we ask our question, Ali?
Oh no, he kind of already touched on it. How do you incorporate? Oh, we asked one question to everyone, and this is the only question that everybody gets. How do you incorporate alcohol into your training and longevity? Feeling like I already know the answer because I've seen it on my
personal
data.
training. Or...
Yeah. Personally, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think I naturally stopped drinking. I don't know why exactly, if it's age or I'm 33 now. I don't know if it's the age or anything, but I naturally stopped drinking at least as much as I used to. So I just enjoy a glass of wine, as French people do. That's a requirement, at least once a week.
Perfect built-in excuse.
But I did find out a cool thing. And again, that's going to be a potential experiment for other people to do. And I'm sure it's going to work for everyone. But if I have a glass of wine and I start drinking it before a meal, and have some of it during the meal rather than having all of it after. So basically, if I finish my glass before finishing the meal, I have a completely different glucose spike the next day, not throughout the dinner or just after. I can see that my resting heart rate, which usually when you drink over a certain threshold stays elevated for longer, doesn't have that. So it's basically just same level, slightly elevated, but throughout the night, not like a spike and then staying high. So my thinking is I can get away if I have it before dinner.
I've read a study that says that too, that a glass before the meal will keep you more stable and lower levels. Yeah. A lot of people talk about.
I think Levels is doing that right now. I think I've heard that they're doing a wearable challenge on this, that they run as a small study to get some data on that.
I feel like they also shy away from alcohol stuff because you quickly realize that alcohol is not a thing that spikes you. If anything, it'll keep you lower. But they don't want to reinforce that, oh, okay, well, obviously this is great then. I'll just get drunk all the time. But you talked about the 20% thing. Can you speak a little more about that? Where is that the percentage that you aim to keep the bad stuff? It feels high to me, 80-20. I feel like it should.
Yeah, it is high. I think it's more like the idea of saying that the good things you should probably do them most of the time, and the bad things should probably be the exception. But
it's more like 1%
is high.
Yeah, like on the weekend I'm just getting bombed because that's 20% of my week.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a rule about that. And
I want to know the specific cheat ratio.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something we could do about that. We've been doing something similar with people coming back from holidays, being completely off track, having to restart their normal routine, not even thinking about running a new experiment, and how long it takes to just go back to baseline pre-holidays, basically. So it's not yet like just a weekend, how do you restart every week and go back to optimal within like a day or two. But that's actually really interesting. Just looking at the data and how long it takes for the average person and for some individuals who got really off track to go back to normal. And I want to see that data for longer so we can start maybe focusing a bit more on this. We could have like a whole experiment or like a baseline thing where you just spend 2 weeks to go back to normal. Um, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Now that has me thinking about getting better at recovery in general feels similar to getting over a hangover, or the idea of metabolic flexibility, where if I can dip into fat burning and go back to carbs and fat and carbs, maybe I can, and get better at that. Maybe I can also get better at cheating and then getting back on the wagon and then doing that faster. But I don't know, that sounds irresponsible.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, cheating is like very wide. It could be, just eating a lot of things that are not the typical macronutrients that you would have. And then it could be like something that's like a lot of industrially processed food that should probably not have. And you're having as a one cheat meal, which is probably fine. And then when it becomes like you're having that most of the time, I think that's where the problem is. So I guess it depends on the type of cheat.
Yes. So where is Span right now in terms of getting users? Let the fitheads know. Are you in beta? How do we get access? Or are you not even working on that yet?
No, we've got more than 100 members. We've opened up the program now, so it's like just out of beta, basically. Officially, you still have to sign up on the website, get on the wait list, but we're onboarding people within a week now. And yeah, it's really exciting. We've seen more people joining recently with an Oura Ring, a Hoop Strap, an Apple Watch, CGM. There's so many other brands of CGMs that pop up now, and we can't really keep track, but they all use the same sensors anyway. And yeah, that's pretty much it. People optimize their diet, sleep, and exercise. Some people who have been with us for more than 8 months now, they can see a very clear trend of like looking at sleep and average glucose and all these things, and everything is heading in the right direction, which is a really good sign. And now we're trying to accelerate that process and become better ourselves so we can deliver that much more quickly. So you join within 3 weeks, we can try and guarantee that if we need to improve your sleep and deep sleep seems to be your thing, we're going to get it there within 3 weeks. And be on that trajectory at least to maintain it in the long term.
Very cool. All right. So where can we go sign up?
Cool. So yeah, people can go on the website. So it's www.span.health. And you have a sign up thing there. You can also just reach out to me on Twitter. I'll be happy to take you through the platform if you want it on a call. Yeah. Very
cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been very interesting. I'm gonna go strap more things onto me. And thank you to the fit heads. We appreciate you rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out a whole lot. And we will see you next week.